Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another special edition of the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at The Bills Guys. And I was inspired to make this podcast today because, well, we love the draft here at the Air Raid Hour. And I'm starting to see on my social media feeds, all my draft follows, people on Twitter, starting to get back into the game a little bit, previewing all the prospects to watch for the 2023 college football season. And it's got me sort of amped up. And since we are in the month of July, I thought, why not take some time today to go through the Bills roster and assess what the possible positions of need for the Buffalo Bills could be heading into next offseason. So again, putting the cart before the horse here. So I sort of combed the roster. I looked at a number of things and I took a number of things into account, including who are some of the pending unrestricted free agents next offseason, who are some players who are getting a little bit older, etc., in order to sort of hone in on some position groups that maybe we should, as Bills fans, be focusing in on during this college football season. So what I need from you guys this evening or this morning or this afternoon, whenever you're listening, what I need from you guys is, as I break down the 2024 Buffalo Bills, when you're listening to this, I want you to head into the comment section here on YouTube. And on this video, I want you to let me know what you think are the three positions you think will be the Buffalo Bills' biggest perceived draft needs going into 2024 and why. What position groups are you going to be focusing on this college football season? And maybe you even have a player or two that you have an eye on heading into this college football season. So let's get this thing kicked off by taking a look at the Buffalo Bills offense. And here is sort of on the screen here, if you're watching and if you're listening, I'm going to do this verbally. But here you see on the screen a 2024 skeleton of the Buffalo Bills offense and what it will look like after next season, barring any significant additions or extensions to the roster between now and obviously then. At quarterback, the only quarterback on the roster after this season is obviously the franchise quarterback, Josh Allen. And as we know, the Bills have been sort of consistently scanning the veteran free agent market for Josh Allen's number two. They did it with Mitch Trubisky and Case Keenum and now Kyle Allen. And they also have Matt Barkley to rely on in the meeting rooms during the preseason, sort of that training camp type of arm that always ends up on the practice squad. One of these years, the Buffalo Bills could maybe look to the draft for a long-term developmental backup. But sometimes you land your Tyler Huntley like the Baltimore Ravens, and sometimes you're the Buffalo Bills and you land a Jake Fromm. So it's a very hit or miss type of thing, but it's always fun to sort of keep an eye on the college football quarterbacks. This year in college football, it's going to be Drake May. It's going to be Caleb Williams. Those are the guys everyone's going to be talking about. Michael Penix Jr. is getting a lot of love. The kid from Duke, whose name is escaping me, is getting a lot of love. There's a ton of fun college football quarterbacks that you can watch and enjoy this offseason. But as a Bills fan, knock on wood, barring anything awful happening to Josh Allen, we're not going to need any of those quarterbacks, nor are we going to be drafting any of those quarterbacks. But it's always fun to sort of keep an eye on those sleepers, right? Those guys who go towards the end of the draft, maybe a guy like a Dorian Thompson-Robinson last year, you can envision the Buffalo Bills drafting and maybe making into a backup quarterback of the future. So again, not a huge need for the Buffalo Bills. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it today. But some of the guys in 2024, the DTR types that I really like in college football, keep an eye on Cam Ward out of Washington State. He's really fun. And keep an eye on Keaton Slovis out of BYU, the former USC, former Pitt quarterback. Both those guys, I think, are going to go later on in the draft because they're older prospects. They got a lot of college football under their belt, Slovis especially. And I think those are guys who could come in and they could be career backups in the National Football League. And those are the type of guys that you might be able to get in the 6th, 7th round unless they really raise their draft stock this year. So Slovis and Cam Ward are two guys to keep an eye on. Looking at running backs in the 2024 situation at running back, you have James Cook, who will still be on his rookie deal, Nyheim Hines, who will be going into the last year of his deal, and you obviously still have fullback Reggie Gilliam. This position is interesting, right? Fans have high hopes for James Cook and Damian Harris heading into the 2023 season. But Harris and Murray are on one-year deals, And Hines still has something to prove as an offensive weapon in 2023 to guarantee he'll be back in 2024. In my opinion, I wouldn't be scouting the running backs in college football too hard. Enjoy them for what they are. There are some fun ones out there. Braylon Allen from Wisconsin is one of my favorite draft prospects. I think he could really rise. The things he's done as a 19-year-old, and he's going to be still 19 heading into this college football season. At 6'2", 220 pounds is insane. I love Braylon Allen. So there are going to be some interesting running backs this year that you can follow along and enjoy. But in my opinion, sort of the Bills have gone this route the last couple of years. Motor, Moss, James Cook. And in my opinion, like it appears like maybe the Buffalo Bills philosophy is shifting a little bit, right? It seems like maybe the later round guys, the value free agents could be the Buffalo Bills' new route. If Damian Harris has a good year and prices himself out, or Damian Harris is a bust, maybe the Buffalo Bills go and they just look to find another Damian Harris in the bargain bin pile of free agency. They go try to find another Latavius Murray. Who knows what the Buffalo Bills will decide to do in 2024? It's still really cloudy. It depends on how these guys who are in expiring deals sort of play on the football field, how James Cook progresses. Right now, it's not a high value need for me just because, again, it's sort of that old adage. Running backs can be found anywhere. So I don't think it's something that I'm going to scout too hard this college football season. I'm still going to enjoy running backs when I watch college football because there's a ton of fun ones. Benson from Florida State's another one. But I don't think it's going to be something I'm going to be focusing too much of my attention on. But it's hard to miss running backs when you turn on a college football game. So I'm sure you'll be able to enjoy them. Next up is the receiving core. This is also very, very interesting, right? This could potentially be the Buffalo Bills' biggest need heading into 2024. You have Stephon Diggs, who's now inching further and further, is going to be inching further and further past the age of 30 years old. I think he'll get there next season. Deontay Hardy is under contract, 2-year deal. Shakir and Shorter, the 2 fifth-round picks the last 2 years. Those are the guys under contract. Then obviously you have Knox, you have Kincaid, Quentin Morris is an ERFA, Gabriel Davis is a UFA, Trent Sherfield is a UFA. So again, this could potentially be the Bills' biggest need heading into next season. Unless Kincaid, like really, really Kelsey level, steps up and gives the Bills like a massive, clear as day receiving option number 2, it's going to appear to be the Buffalo Bills are going to have a massive need at wide receiver in 2024. If Gabriel Davis is not re-signed, that could be a massive hole the Buffalo Bills need to sort of fill. Could they re-sign Gabriel Davis? Yeah, they could. Could they go the veteran route like they have in years past to fill Gabriel Davis's spot if Gabriel Davis walks? Guys like Emmanuel Sanders have come in the past, Cole Beasley, John Brown. Yeah, they could do that as well. But monetarily, using an early asset on a wide receiver next year will give the Bills a cost-controlled option from 2024 to 2029 who can come in as a wide receiver number 2. And if you're using high capital on a wide receiver, you're going to expect that receiver to eventually possibly supersede Stephon Diggs as wide receiver number 1 as Stephon Diggs progresses later and later into his 30s. So wide receiver could be the biggest need for the Buffalo Bills in 2024. Another interesting position, which could also, you could argue, be the Buffalo Bills' biggest need in 2024 is going to be offensive tackle. Under contract next year, they'll have Deion Dawkins, they'll have Spencer Brown, they'll have Tommy Doyle. And it's interesting because the biggest wild card of the 2023 season is likely going to be right tackle Spencer Brown. I'm fairly confident with someone not named Roger Saffold next to him that Deion Dawkins is going to bounce back and he's going to get back into his old form in 2023. So if Brown can sort of put it all together, we would appear to be set at offensive tackle. But if he has another year like he has the last 2 years, this is a 5-star need. This is a massive, massive need for this football team heading into the 2024 offseason. However, even if Brown does develop, this could still be a relatively big need. If you think about it and you sort of project forward, and that's what Brandon Beane often does. He's often thinking 2 years ahead when he drafts. If you look ahead, even if Spencer Brown clicks, well, then you have to pay Spencer Brown in 2025. Consequently, that's also when Deion Dawkins' deal is up. So you may want to draft a guy a year early in 2024 to come in, play swing tackle, be waiting in the wings in 2025 to replace Dion, because you might not want to pay Dion and Spencer Brown big money, especially if Dion's going to be past 30 years old at that point. You're probably not going to want to pay another street free agent because, again, talking about allocating your monetary resources with Josh Allen under this big contract, and you're probably not going to want to start a rookie. So if you draft an offensive tackle in 2024, you'd have somebody waiting in the wings to replace Deion Dawkins in 2025 if Spencer Brown pans out. And that is a big old if. But looking at it, if or if not, Spencer Brown develops properly and becomes a good football player for this team, I think offensive tackle is still going to be a need for this team heading into 2024. And then you look at the interior of the offensive line. This is, again, Morse, McGovern, Torrance, Bates, and Broker are all under contract heading into next offseason. But this is where the major investment was this past offseason. Bates seems to be maybe the offensive center in waiting, while McGovern and Torrance are your two younger guards. Hopefully Broker becomes a quality backup in like the Ike Butker type of mold. You'll still have a need at guard heading into the 2024 offseason. You can always add more there. Butker and Edwards are going to be free agents. Maybe possibly Mitch Morse could be gone as well next offseason. So you always want to have depth there and you always want to be adding there. But compared to some other positions, we focused on guard a lot this year. We might not be focusing on guard so much next year unless Osiris Torrance falls on his face. Connor McGovern was a bust. Like, let's not think about that yet. Let's hope that doesn't happen in the 2023 season. I think the one wild card that could make this a massive need is if the Bills don't think Ryan Bates is the next center, and if they believe Mitch Morse's time is running out on the Buffalo Bills. Now, a lot of fans think Mitch Morse's time is running out. I don't think Mitch Morse thinks his time is running out. He's probably the oldest 29-year-old you'll ever see in your entire life, right? The oldest looking 29-year-old you'll ever see in your life. He's got that concussion history. So if the Buffalo Bills don't believe that Ryan Bates is like the guy in waiting, the guy who's going to be the heir apparent to Mitch Morse, whether it's next year or the year after that he finds his way off the Buffalo Bills roster, they could possibly target a true center early in the draft next season. But that is, again, one of the wild card positions that could be of need for the Buffalo Bills. So let's take a look now at the skeleton of the 2024 Buffalo Bills defense and what the Buffalo Bills will have on their roster beyond this upcoming football season. At the edge position, you're going to have Von Miller, you're going to have Gregory Rousseau, you're going to have Boogie Basham, right? There's some names coming off the board for the Buffalo Bills coming off the roster in 2024. AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, Leonard Floyd. This is another year, another possibility that edge could be a huge need for this football team. In the Bills' defense, because I know a lot of fans are probably going to be frustrated, almost every team in the league says this year after year after year, right? Like, it's the most important aspect of the defense, and good edge rushers are hard to find. And again, you look at this, Miller's going to be another year older. Hopefully Rousseau takes a step. We all want Rousseau to take a step. And even if he doesn't, he's still a solid length and strength left end. Floyd and Epinesa could always come back, but still you're going to want to keep your eyes out for edge rushers this fall because the Bills and other teams around the league are constantly trying to upgrade their rotation. It's always nice to add another quality edge rusher whenever you have the chance. On the interior of the defensive line, this is where things get interesting. Ed Oliver is the only major defensive tackle who's going to be under contract next season after he signed that extension. This could be a major, major need up there with wide receiver, up there with offensive tackle for this football team. Brandon Beane even stated he wanted to add a defensive tackle in this year's draft. The board just didn't fall his way. And that's why they ended up adding Poona Ford after the draft. I like the idea of extending Daquan Jones, possibly locking up Poona Ford long-term. Heck, if Phillips rebounds, we could run all four of these dudes back in 2024, no problem. And I don't think Brandon Beane or the Buffalo Bills would lose any sleep over it. But if they play well, it'll probably be too much money to invest in one position group. You always want to try to get younger and have guys waiting in the wings at your position. It's always good to rotate in those younger guys in a rotation before they sort of have to take the step into being full-time starters, right? So you'll be looking to add possibly a one tech to replace Jones or Puna Ford or both. And you might be looking to add a three tech to the rotation to replace Jordan Phillips as well. So interior defensive line is a position group I'll be paying close attention to during this college football season. Then you look at linebacker. This one is tricky. You got Milano coming back. You got Dorian Williams, a third-round pick, Terrell Bernard, a third-round pick, and Baylon Spector. All these guys are locked up past the 2023 season into 2024. Jordan Reed of ESPN recently did a mock draft where he had Jeremiah Trotter Jr. going to the Bills in the first round. This is a projected stud off-ball linebacker. I wouldn't be surprised if he works his way by next season into the top 15 picks of the draft, even though off-ball linebackers aren't as in demand as they used to be. And it would be smart for the Bills to go out and get a stud linebacker with the lineage of a Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and let him develop, because by the time he reaches his second deal, by the time, a guy like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. becomes a stud NFL caliber inside linebacker, Matt Milano's deal will be up and you'll have a guy in waiting in Jeremiah Trotter Jr. However, as a Bills fan, and honestly, as Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott looking at it as well, you use a third-round pick on Dorian Williams. You use a third-round pick on Terrell Bernard. Those aren't insignificant investments, right? So it would be a tough pill to swallow, adding another linebacker to the mix here. So this college season, my suggestion would be to hone in on those absolute stud middle linebackers, the guys like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. or any of the other names that sort of emerge, the guys who are like first-round looking dudes. Because unless it's one of those studly looking dudes, if we use one of our first three picks on a linebacker next year, that will be uber frustrating. Unless, again, it's that studly guy who is just like plug and play right away and just gives you sort of that Edmonds filler. But again, we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. Dorian Williams could plug and play right away, or Dorian Williams could take the Matt Milano route halfway through his rookie year, enter the starting lineup, and be a stud. And we're not having this conversation anymore. Terrell Bernard could step up. We're not having this conversation anymore, right? Baylon Spector, of all people, could step up. We're not having this conversation anymore. So again, it's early, but it's July. We're having a little bit of fun here, projecting what the 2024 Buffalo Bills could look like and some of the perceived needs that they might have. At corner, Trey White, Kyer Elam, Christian Benford, Alex Austin, this year's 7th-round pick, all under contract through next season. Nickel corner, Teron Johnson still got 2 years left on his deal. Saran Neal still has 2 years left on the new deal that he signed. So really, this should not be a need in 2024. The only significant name that's dropping off is Dane Jackson. The hope is that Elam and Benford continue to develop and Trey White gets back to form, right? I'm going to be very, very upset if by mid-season we're talking about cornerback prospects on Twitter. I will be in a very, very bad place if that is a conversation that we're having. We should be set there for at least a couple of years. It's always good to add depth, right? It's always good to draft the Alex Austins of the world, guys who slip, the Dane Jacksons of the world. It's always good to draft those guys who slip, spend day 3 picks on corners, continue to add competition, continue to add depth, whatever. But if we're drafting one in the first 3 rounds, something significantly went wrong with Trey White's ACL or Kyer Elam and Christian Benford's development. Safety is a different story, though, right? Because you have a whole ton of different things going on. First of all, under contract through next season, Poyer, Hamlin, and Zane Anderson. Micah Hyde, his contract is up. Taylor Rapp, it was a 1-year deal. Dean Marlowe, 1-year deal. On top of all of that, Poyer and Hyde are also getting up there in age. I personally would love to have Micah Hyde back in 2024. Give him a 1-year extension sometime during training camp once you see that he's healthy, right? Match his contract to Jordan Poyer so they can both leave at the same time. Maybe lock in Taylor Rapp to an extension early next off season. And then we can put this conversation off to 2025 because then it'll be, okay, Taylor Rapp is your heir apparent to Jordan Poyer. We got to go find a center fielder to replace Micah Hyde. But that might not be reality. And it'll be really interesting to see how Rapp is used this year. It'll be really interesting to see how Poyer and Hyde reconnect and how they get back to work. Because both of them are now also on the wrong side of 30. Sean McDermott has shown that he can find gems here at the safety position, but it is an important part of his defense. So for now, unless things change, to me, this is pretty high on my list of priorities for 2024 and the 2024 offseason. There are some fun looking early round safeties who could come in and hopefully, be the next generation of Hyde and Poyer. And then I added special teams here at the end. Tyler Bass, Sam Martin, Reed Ferguson. Thankfully, they're all locked up and we don't have to be talking about specialists until Punter Palooza might be back in the 2025 offseason. So what I did after I did this rundown of what the Buffalo Bills roster is going to look like in 2024 is I came up with 5 positions, the top 5 to me perceived draft needs heading into 2024 for the Buffalo Bills. The 5 positions I came up with: wide receiver, offensive tackle, edge rusher, interior defensive lineman, and safety. So I'm going to run through some names that are interesting. I'm going to talk about each of the draft classes at these 5 positions, and then we'll sort of close out the podcast here for today. Here are some of my favorite wide receivers to keep an eye on in the 2023 college football season. And this is going to be a loaded class, folks. Like, everyone was talking about the 2023 draft. Oh, it's a weak draft for wide receivers. It's not worth taking any of these guys in the first round. People were really down on the wide receivers this year. That's not going to be the case in 2024. Hopefully, obviously things change. These guys have to go and prove it on the football field. This could go back to like the 2022 draft with Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams. Like, this could be a loaded class in that mold. You obviously have Marvin Harrison Jr., who's the Buffalo Bills are not going to draft. He's going to go in the top 3 picks of the draft. But, Rome Odozzi from Washington, Troy Franklin from Oregon, Xavier Worthy from Texas, Adonai Mitchell, I think, is a sleeper. He's the running mate for Xavier Worthy there at Texas. Malik Neighbors from LSU, one of my favorite receivers in the country. Keep an eye on LSU and Malik Neighbors. I love Malik Neighbors. And then obviously a guy who's getting a lot of love on social media is Marvin Harrison Jr.'s running mate there at Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka. He is a former 5-star. He runs a really solid route tree. He's a guy who, again, probably going to end up being a top 15 pick. But you never really know. Things change between now and the 2024 NFL draft. And what I love doing is I like looking at all the top prospects, because every year, like, a guy has a down college football season who we thought was a top 15 pick slides to the back half of the first round, and the Buffalo Bills sort of snag them. Kyrie Elam was in the first round of all the early mock drafts, like the mock drafts that come out the day after the previous draft. So like when the 2021 draft was over, Kyrie Elam was in almost every single mock draft for 2022. Right. And he was relatively high. He had sort of a iffy year, right? But the upside was there. Everyone knew Kyrie Elam's name. The Bills drafted him. Gregory Rousseau was the same way. Ed Oliver was the same way. These are all guys who were high profile names heading into their college football seasons. So keeping an eye on these high profile names, even though they might seem unrealistic because you think they're going to go before the Bills pick in the latter half of the first round, maybe it's not unrealistic for some of these guys. Offensive tackle class is also loaded. Good for the Buffalo Bills, right? Obviously, it's going to be hard to imagine a world where Joe Alt from Notre Dame or Ali Fashanu from Penn State are there for the Buffalo Bills. Those guys would have been top 10 picks in this year's draft had they declared. But you got J.C. Latham from Bama. You got Graham Barton from Duke. 2 sleepers I really like: Kingsley Samadiati out of BYU, Jack Nelson from Wisconsin. I like a lot of these guys who could be late first, second round picks projected in the 2024 draft. It's a good draft for offensive tackles as well. A promising looking safety group. It's obviously hard to gauge. You'll get a better idea once you see them on the football field. You see these guys continue to progress as football players, but I love Cameron Kitchens out of Miami. I love Kalen Bullock out of USC, Rod Moore out of Michigan, Cole Bishop out of Utah, just to name a few. Edge rushers, again, it appears to be an absolutely loaded class of young edge rushers. You got Jared Verse out of Florida State, Chop Robinson out of Penn State, Dallas Turner out of Bama, JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State. A lot of big name pass rushers. The depth of the class still needs to shake itself out. There are some other names that I don't have on my list here that are very good as well. The kid out of UCLA, whose name I'm blanking on. So it appears to be another loaded class at edge rusher. So maybe someone drops to the Buffalo Bills at the back half of the first round. And then interior defensive line, who I talked about as being a rather big need for the Buffalo Bills if either Daquan Jones or Poona Ford or Jordan Phillips fall off a cliff or continue to be hurt or just aren't back in 2024 for whatever reason. Jerzon Newton from Illinois is sort of the number one DT on most people's boards right now. Leonard Taylor from Miami, Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State. These are 5-star recruits that have sort of lived up and show a lot of upside. It's a pretty decent looking IDL class. You got Mason Smith from LSU coming off an ACL. He'll be an interesting one to watch. Then my favorite player in this year's draft. I already got a favorite player in the 2024 draft, and it's Dante Corleone from Cincinnati. I mean, this kid is 6'2", 320. Last year as a redshirt freshman, was an absolute plugger in the run game. PFF said his freshman year at Cincinnati, he was up there in run stuffing with guys like Quinnen Williams. And he was just in a league of his own as a plugger. So I see a guy like Dante Corleone who has embraced his last name, calls himself the Godfather. He would be an awesome plugger. He's just a strong dude next to Ed Oliver, but I'm jumping the gun here, but that's a name I want you guys to keep an eye on. I posted about him on social media on Twitter. Dante Corleone, out of Cincinnati. He's a fun guy to keep an eye on. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, hit me up in the comment section. Number one, what do you think the Bills' biggest 2024 draft needs will be? And again, there's no shame in just putting out there what you think the perceived needs will be and why you think that will be the perceived need. So maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you think it's a different position because you're not high on this player or this player that's already on the roster, etc. So let me know what you think the biggest perceived. Give me your top 3 list, your top 5 list, however you want to frame it in the comment sections on YouTube. And maybe I always love adding prospects to my spreadsheet. So if you have some prospects that we here at the Air Raid Hour should keep an eye on in the 2023 season, post their names below in the comment section as well as why you think that we should be following them. Tell us a little bit about their game. We're always looking for more guys to add to our list. So we will be back next week live again. Dave will be returning. We'll be live taking comments from people in the comment section, and we'll be outlining the biggest training camp storylines for the Buffalo Bills on defense. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!